Well, here we are, thanking God once again. It's Friday afternoon. That means it's the really live Green Rush talk show all about the cannabis business. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Meida. And this week, we're going to be joined as a guest host with Rick Thompson. He's our regular Michigan State correspondent for our Weed Talk news show and also the executive director of the Normal Division in Michigan. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Jimmy, I'm always awesome, and it's great to be on Green.
Yeah, and happy to have you on here with us as well. As always, we look forward to your weekly news reports in our We Talk News program. There's a lot of stuff happening as we speak in the cannabis industry as far as news goes, and we're also right in the middle, we're only a few days away from midterm elections, and that is going to be a very interesting result. No matter which way it goes, there's going to be plenty of things to talk about a week from today after the election. But joining us from Washington, D.C. is Michael Correia. He's the Director of Government Relations for the National Cannabis Industry Association. We call him NCIA. Michael, thank you so much for joining us again here on Green Rush Live.
Hey, Jimmy, it's great to be here. Beautiful Friday. I just have to say I love Rick's backdrop, the books. You look all sophisticated and everything. I need to stay like this. I just have this piece of artwork behind me. That's it. I need to class it up.
It's a tapestry. So yeah, for sure. Yep. I got to be honest. I don't collect that many books. No.
It makes him look
cannabis.
And for the record, I probably have as many books in the other room. I just choose to be surrounded by flora and fauna. Okay, that's just that's my studio. Hey, Michael, there's a lot of things happening as we speak, but I do want to get right into the what was the lead story on our news show that was released about maybe 2-3 hours ago on We Talk News, and it will be following this particular live stream, this live show at 6 o'clock. And that is the fact that there's whispering going on that safe banking plus may be happening in the lame duck Congress. I don't know when, but it's going to be another week, 2-3 weeks, and or some expungement issues with that. And will there be descheduling? Because I continue to say that's the one thing I want to see happen. Michael, where are we right now as far as the scuttlebutt in DC goes, as far as federal cannabis reform?
So, I mean, the one thing you mentioned, safe banking, you mentioned the lame duck. We had our lobby days in September, and Senator Merkley spoke at our press conference, and he said they were talking about this. They had language. They had some ideas of Safe Plus. And, you know, when people talk about Plus, people sort of know the big pictures. It's around expungement. It's around veterans. It's around research, stuff like that. Nothing major, but some ways to get more buy-in from Democratic people like Booker and Schumer because they want to address all the issues of cannabis, but they're not going to be addressed in SAFE. Can we get a little more to make it more palatable for them? And so that got me excited about a month or so ago, but I have been talking with Senate offices, a lot of Senate leadership offices around SAFE, and I'll be honest with you, all of them are in a wait and see period right now. None of them, there is no language floating around. It's just still that concept. There are really good discussions. We've talked to the Republican side, Democratic side, and everyone's just waiting. And so there's not really serious discussions going on. I hate to say it, it's probably a game of chicken right now just to see what happens with the election and then see who's in a position of authority, where's going to be the leverage from a negotiating standpoint of what they can do or not do with SAFE, and then come back and revisit it. So it's frustrating because I assume they would be doing more discussions now, getting closer to the election. It looks like they're just going to wait till the election and then decide who has the leverage and what can they offer from there. And, you know, we mentioned the election. There's a chance, you know, a close election like Georgia may not, it may go to a runoff. That may be a couple weeks before we figure out. What if it's 49-50 with that election still outgoing? We could be waiting till December before we know. Just like in 2020, we didn't know how it would turn out until January 2021, where it sort of played out. So I think we'll get 90% certainty by next Wednesday where we're at, but we may have a seat or two still open.
Since we have Rick alongside here in Michigan, there's been some changes in that state too, but there are 5 states, I believe, that have ballot questions related to the cannabis space, whether it be adult use or medical. It does look like Maryland is going to pass it. How do you view some of the other states that have adult use or at least a medical program on the ballot question this fall? Oh, Rick, you can answer that too
I'm
if you
sorry.
want.
Well, first of all, I'm excited about it. You have North and South Dakota both going at it. And frankly, the center part of the United States of America has really been a holdover in a lot of ways and a lot of issues. And cannabis has been one of those. So I'm hopeful that it'll pass us through. Now, recognize that not all legalization programs are created equal. If you remember Ohio's history, Responsible Ohio tried to have a statewide legalization program that the voters rejected, largely because cannabis advocates could not buy into that particular program. And the very next time it was offered to voters, they approved it. So it's possible that some of these may be a good first try and then leading off into a second effort. But I think we get 3 of the 5. That's what we've been looking at.
Michael, you concur?
Yeah, and Rick's correct. Every legalization bill is not the exact same. And so, Ohio showed years ago that, hey, why are we going to sit here and let monopolies and monopolist companies get all the money? It has to be sort of open, and so it's not just legalization. The support is there for legalization, but the devil is in the details. And for the most part, for the past few years, it's been blue states have been doing this, and so now you're starting to see the traditional purple states and even red states doing this, which will affect more in DC and Republican members. If this passes in like an Arkansas or other true Republican states. It already passed in South Dakota, and then the courts threw it out. I'm assuming it will pass again. The politicians can listen to their voters and just say, I still hate cannabis, or they want to represent their industries and stand up for their industries, and it could slowly change their perception of what the voters want.
Voters flock to the ballot box whenever cannabis seems to be on in those questions. Is there any idea? And Rick, I want to get your feedback on this too. Does it actually impact the power of Congress because cannabis happens to be on 5 states' ballot questions? I just wonder if that means we'll have more voters come out, and will that tip the power inside the Capitol? I'm fascinated to see what happens. Rick, what do you think?
Well, I think that individual states have their own power dynamics. Here in Michigan, we already had a robust program going on with medical marijuana patients and caregivers prior to the introduction of a medical marijuana business program in 2016. And then, of course, adult use legalization in 2018 too. So we went through a progression that made it easy for the electorate to say yes every time we offered them an opportunity. Some of the states are trying to jump. They're going from absolutely nothing to legalization, or they're advancing themselves in a way that might not necessarily entrance the voters, I think. So again, it comes down to each individual state, but increasing voter turnout, no matter what the issue is a positive. I think that's been one of the real problems in the United States of America, is people choosing to not participate when the government asks them what they care about, and then complaining about it for years after.
And normally, when cannabis is on the ballot, it is usually the highest vote getter of any person running statewide. And you see this over and over again, to where it's just more popular than almost any politician. And you can read in that what you want. What you see, I think, a lot is the cannabis voters, supporters. That could get younger voters out, and that could get more activist voters out that maybe wouldn't have voted regardless. That could help Democrats. I don't think in a state like South Dakota or Arkansas, is that going to make a difference on politics? No. But in a state where it's really close, where it's purple, and you have 2 statewide guys, that could actually bring out some voters and help the Democrats. I doubt it's going to help Republicans, because just, as a whole, Republicans aren't as supportive of this. There's a libertarian wing to this, but I think if it's on a ballot in the state, it's probably going to help Democrats more, but I think it's only going to help Democrats in those really close states, and you could probably just get a handful of those that would possibly help.
Yeah, as we look back at the results and analyze them, it's going to be interesting to look at the connections between the ballot questions in the state that perhaps was wavering one way or another. And did the cannabis vote tip the scales or not? And by the way, it's 2022. I cannot believe we're still talking about the fact that how important it is to get cannabis on the ballot question. Okay, we're talking about ballot questions with cannabis involved with it and how it might impact the power of how our parties deal with each other at the federal level. I live to see the day. I still pinch myself when I go to cannabis events and talk to people about this. And, I teach at the college level, and I literally had to beg 4 kids who are 18 plus, haven't registered to vote, to please go and vote, and explain to them how important it is. Because a lot of these 18-year-olds, these college kids, they don't recognize that they have power in their brain and in their hand just to make that check, and just have to show a little effort to do that. Again, as we look at all the election results, I'm still fascinated with the fact that we continue to put leaders in place where we don't have half the people in our country who are eligible to vote.
And so I wanted to say one thing. When you look back at cannabis and voters in Colorado, Cory Gardner was the senator, and he was pretty good on cannabis. And they voted him out, and they brought in Hickenlooper, who is a Democrat, is just as good, if not better. You had Dana Rohrabacher, a Republican congressman, the leader of the cannabis for years, got voted out in California. You had Carlos Curbelo, a Republican who was good on cannabis in Florida, got voted out. You had, someone like Susan Collins of Maine, bad on the issue. She retained her election. And so when you look at this, Republicans are going, this is not a winning issue for us. It has not won us seats. It's not carrying voters. And so I think that comes into their calculations on their positions on how open and active and out they're going to be on cannabis. You have Nancy Mace from South Carolina that's sort of been the one salmon fishing or running upstream, going against the current, because it's not a popular issue in South Carolina. The Republican Party's not supportive, but her voters are, and you've seen her win. And so we need more Republican winning on this for the Republicans to embrace it. It's just tending to be a more Democratic issue. But I want cannabis reform happening. I get just as frustrated with Dianne Feinstein out there, who has the biggest state in the world, on cannabis, and she's doing nothing on this issue. And we need more people who are supporting this multi-billion-dollar industry and for legalization. We need more supporters up there.
What's her problem, Michael? What's her problem?
Old. She's 90 years old and should retire, and she's an outdated dinosaur and has old, 60s views on cannabis that are just outdated. The demographics tend to be older people, especially politicians. They're not as evolved on this issue, and we just need some new blood in there. She's 90 years old. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Yeah. Hey, you know what?
The war on drugs really did indoctrinate people. It's a brainwashing program, and you really can't fault people who can't shake the programming, because it was put into our lives from a very early age, from elementary school. So someone like Feinstein and those of her ilk, they'd really just sort of have to age out of leadership, right?
Yeah.
Or we bring in term limits, guys. Come on. It's time.
As a political science major, as a person in politics 30 years, I'm not the biggest fan of term limits, but I get it.
But Michael, does our government reflect our populace right now, as far as the makeup, the diversity, the different genders? I mean,
no, but if you know the history, it really never has. And it survived. What is it? The worst form of government except all others? Yeah, it has its flaws, but I'll take it. Listen, I'll take it over where we're going and where the discussion is now. It troubles me because I believe in democracy. Cannabis should be the one unifying issue between Republicans and Democrats. It's one of the few things, when you look at some of the bills, like safe banking is a perfect example, where there's just broad support. You never see that. Everything tends to be partisan. And this is the one thing that is unifying the left and the right in DC. I want to see more of it. It's just, I'll be honest with you. It's November of 2022, and in January of 2021, I had a lot higher hopes of the next 18 to 20 months, and is not played out as well as I thought. And I'll be honest with you. I'll talk to you in a couple weeks, and I'll see if we can blame Democrats or if they can get this over the finish line.
I don't like the word blame, and I don't like the word fault. It's a
Yeah.
process, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it is. Well, so I have to go through my vocabulary to find a better word than blame.
Well, but look, I mean, when you look at the history of cannabis law reform in the United States Congress, blame and fault are totally applicable. Look at Mitch McConnell. Look at people who've completely stopped any positive legislation from passing through the Senate. We have had to shoehorn anything positive about cannabis in on spending bills as a rider in order to get it through the halls of both houses. So there's a lot of fault and blame that can be assigned to specific individuals who absolutely put the brakes on anything positive for a while. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the DC expert.
No, it's totally correct. At the same time, as a lobbyist, I'm not going to gain any friends on the Hill by trashing one person or one senator if they're still not retired. I can trash them when they retire or a day after I retire, but I still have to work through their offices. And listen, if their constituents keep electing them, that's the people I have to deal with, as much as I disagree with them. And if history shows, it's going to be I think, a good election for Republicans, which could be bad for cannabis reform. And so we need to keep working these offices. I can't just throw up my hands and say, okay, Republicans are in charge and they all suck on this issue. My first 6 years doing this was all Republicans in charge and trying to get Rohrabacher, Farr, and other stuff over the finish line. It's just more of a challenge. But listen, we've had 2 years of Democratic control, and minus what Biden did a couple weeks ago, there hasn't been a ton going on. And so,
They treat it like it's an evil, a necessary evil topic that they have to deal with. The necessary evil weed topic, if you will.
We've had that problem in Michigan too. For during the Snyder administration, they had what's called a trifecta, where they controlled the governor's office and the state house and the state senate, and we had to try and push positive cannabis law reform through that particular keyhole during 8 years of the Snyder administration. So absolutely, on a statewide level, I'm experiencing what you have experienced on a federal level.
So politics is one thing. Business is a completely different entity, where the almighty dollar continues to dictate movement on the political scene as well as in the economic scene. And the number one issue in everybody's mind when they go to the polls is the most recent bout with inflation in this country. Despite all that, there is still merger and acquisitions going on, not only in the cannabis space, but in other parts of the country as well, in other elements of industry. But we do have a breaking story, a news story that broke today, which means it didn't make our Weed Talk News, which is put together overnight on Thursdays. It will be, however, talked about now because it's a pretty big deal. And it has to do with Sean Diddy Combs. He's a rapper, businessman, he's a producer, and he's buying, Cresco Labs and the Commonwealth, isn't that who it called? Columbia Care and Cresco Labs is who this guy is buying out. So now you're going to have a multi-state operator with an African-American heritage. This is a good thing for the industry, isn't it, Michael?
Well, I think it's a great thing. And I had actually heard the rumor yesterday at lunch. A friend told me something was going down, and I wasn't able to connect the dots until you finished it. And so it makes sense. Now, I don't know if they're buying these MSOs. They're probably buying their assets in certain states, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, they're
is
acquiring all the
actually
Massachusetts Cresco Labs properties. Yeah.
So it's a Massachusetts play. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not touching Pennsylvania, Ohio, California, Nevada, Arizona, or the Michigan properties. I looked them up on the SEC before the show today. So there's still a huge chunk of Cresco that remains that won't be under Diddy's control. So he's not buying out the entirety of the operation. He's buying a chunk. And I think that goes to the hesitation in the industry. A big company like this would never want to sell off 1/3 of its assets unless there was some instability within the marketplace itself. And I think nationally, we're seeing price instability really drive companies to do things they wouldn't have considered doing 2 years ago.
Yeah, and if you look at the history of cannabis, we know the history was based on racism and the fact that, you're starting to see entities um, made up of people who weren't on the receiving end of the war on drugs, and they don't understand the nuances in the history. And we need ownership who can understand that history and the nuances, and who are able to have allow the industry to be representative and be diverse and equitable. And so we need more faces in industry that show its diversity. And so I think, once the details come out, I would like to go through it, but I think it can only be a win-win for cannabis and just the issue in general.
Yeah. The numbers being thrown around, 185 million, and it's for the Massachusetts, New York, and Illinois 12 total properties. And it is his first investment in the cannabis space. Now, I'm going to read his quote because this is a very powerful quote. And Michael, you bring up the race factor because it is part of the whole cannabis history and story in this country and around the world too. This is a quote from Sean Diddy Combs. I got to tell you guys, I didn't know who this guy was. All right. Now I did know that I know the Sean John clothing. I think I have some underwear by Sean John, actually, but that's the only reason why I would know it. I'm sorry. I'm not very hip. Here's his quote. All right. And this is him speaking, not me. I'm just reading the words. My mission has always been to create opportunities for Black entrepreneurs and industries where we've traditionally been denied access. And this acquisition provides the immediate scale and impact needed to create a more equitable future in cannabis. Owning the entire process from growing and manufacturing to marketing, retail, and wholesale distribution is a historic win for the culture that will allow us to empower diverse leaders throughout the ecosystem and be bold advocates for inclusion. Wouldn't you like to hear that more often, guys?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, not only that, it's like putting their money where their mouth is, and the fact that they're actually, if you are trying to make money in cannabis and you throw a couple pennies to advocacy, I mean, great. But to actually put some money into advocacy and understand and make that connection and actually show diversity working and show equity operators in there, I think it's wonderful. It's only going to be win-win. And I think hopefully it'll inspire others. And hopefully it will, speed along the process. I can't say I have the money to be able to do that. I wish I had $100 and something million where I could throw around. But I think it's going to be great.
I got a Powerball ticket.
Powerball.
After I leave here, I'm going to go buy a couple Powerball.
Go buy a few tickets. That's great.
Here in the city in Michigan, we have Detroit. Detroit has lagged. It's actually only allowed medical marijuana, not adult use cannabis. And the reason that they've been behind is because they're trying to craft an ordinance that allows Detroiters, people that look like the populace in Detroit, to be successful in the industry. And they withstood several legal challenges, and the first ordinance was crashed. But what they're doing now, I think, is going to stick. And it is trying to accomplish exactly what P. Diddy said. Trying to make sure that the industry looks like the people that were the most penalized. 3.5, 3.6 times as likely to be arrested if you're an African-American person for cannabis crimes than if you're a Caucasian person. So when we look at the rectification of those problems, there are federal standards that can be done. There are state-based standards that can be done, but there are also local-based standards too. I think Chicago also took a big stab at trying to resolve social inequities in the cannabis industry as well. I'm not sure how well that worked out, but I can tell you I'm excited about what we're doing in Detroit to try and accomplish that mission.
Michael, last word. Hopeful, optimistic, scared, all of the above when we face this midterm elections right now?
Well, I mean, part of me is scared for democracy of what's going to happen when some of these yahoos come into power, and I can call them Yahoo insurrectionists because I see it. I've lived in DC and I worked on Capitol Hill and I've seen it, and it scares me when people attack democratic institutions in our democracy. And, cannabis reform is going to happen. It's happening at the state levels, it's happening at the local levels. I want Congress to come up and allow more of this to happen and speed it along. The last thing I want is for these bigger MSOs to buy up everyone as Congress twiddles their thumbs and do nothing on it. There's a lot of things Congress can do to speed it up. What Biden did a couple weeks ago was historic, but it's a thought right now, and it's in the government bureaucracy, and that's going to take a lot of time to work through. It's better than nothing, but you can't get like, oh, okay, legalization is going to happen in 12 months. It's not, but at least it's better than it could have been.
That's right. Hey, Michael Correia, always a pleasure to have you on. I so appreciate your commitment to this program, and I always enjoy your commentary. So you're welcome anytime.
Yeah, we'll see how things change in about 8 days, and we'll see what the turnout of the election is, and that'll change cannabis reform.
There you go. Hey, we're going to talk with some media moguls coming up in the next half hour, including JJ McKay from the Fresh Toast. So do not go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.